one camera, one direct accusation, and one name that still divides professional golf. Rory McIlroy stood before reporters and placed Phil Mickelson back at the center of golf's ugliest civil war. His charge was blunt. Mickelson's frustration with the PGA Tour did not justify blowing the entire professional game up by helping launch the LIV Golf Rebellion. At 56, Mickelson was exposed to a fresh wave of criticism from the man who became the PGA Tour's loudest defender. McIlroy did not accuse Phil of breaking a golf rule or committing a crime. He accused him of choosing destruction over dialogue. That distinction matters because the conflict changed careers, damaged friendships, split fans, and forced golf into years of legal and financial warfare. Now Phil's original motives are being judged against everything that followed. Was Mickelson a fearless reformer who forced the PGA Tour to improve, or did he use a rival league to settle personal grievances at the sport's expense? This was the moment Rory McIlroy dropped a bombshell accusation live on camera. Mickelson's role in the LIV uprising, the uncomfortable evidence supporting both sides, and the damage golf still cannot repair. If you are a golf fan who refuses to accept easy answers, subscribe right now. Tell us whether Phil saved professional golf or shattered it for personal gain. McIlroy delivered the attack while discussing LIV Golf's influence on the professional game. He acknowledged that the PGA Tour had made mistakes before the breakaway league arrived. Players wanted better prize money. They demanded greater control over their media rights. Many believed the tour's leaders had failed to explain where the money went or how major decisions were made. Rory did not defend every PGA Tour decision. He accepted that reform was necessary. Then he drew the line. McIlroy argued that Mickelson's dissatisfaction should have led to a serious conversation with tour officials. Instead, Phil became the most powerful American face attached to a Saudi-backed league designed to challenge the PGA Tour directly. Rory described that response as blowing up the professional game and doing something else rather than fixing the existing structure. That was the bombshell accusation. It cut deeper than another complaint about money. Rory was attacking Phil's judgment, leadership, and legacy. Mickelson had spent decades benefiting from the PGA Tour. He collected 45 victories, built a global brand, won 6 major championships, and became one of the richest athletes in golf history. When he believed the system no longer served the players, he did not merely criticize it. He helped its greatest rival gain instant credibility. Phil's supporters call that courage. Rory calls it destruction. The timing made the accusation even harsher. Professional golf had already endured years of division. Major champions disappeared from regular PGA Tour events. Ryder Cup relationships became strained. Lawsuits exposed private messages and internal arguments. Sponsors faced difficult choices. Fans were asked to follow 2 separate products, while leaders repeatedly promised agreements that never produced a clean reunification. McIlroy's point was simple. None of this had to happen. Phil Mickelson's side of the story began before LIV staged its first tournament. He had complained about the PGA Tour's financial structure, control of media assets, and handling of player opportunities. He believed the most valuable golfers were not receiving a fair share of the wealth they generated. Those concerns were not invented. The PGA Tour later increased purses, created elevated events, expanded player benefits, introduced equity opportunities, and changed its entire commercial structure. Many reforms matched problems Mickelson had raised. LIV's arrival created pressure the tour could no longer ignore. That gives Phil's defenders their strongest argument. Golf's establishment changed only after a genuine competitor threatened its control. Without Mickelson, the old system might have continued. But McIlroy's accusation targeted the method, not merely the complaint. A problem can be real, while the chosen solution remains reckless. Rory believed Mickelson had enough status to demand reform without joining an operation designed to pull elite players away from the PGA Tour. Phil possessed influence, relationships, wealth, and access. He was not a powerless rookie begging to be heard. He was Phil Mickelson. That is why Rory's words landed so hard. He was accusing one of golf's most decorated stars of using extraordinary power irresponsibly. But here is what most people still get wrong about this feud. Rory was not denying that Phil identified serious problems. He was saying Phil turned legitimate complaints into a weapon that wounded the entire sport. The fracture became public in early 2022 after Mickelson's comments about the proposed Saudi-backed league emerged through author Alan Shipnuck. Phil acknowledged concerns about Saudi Arabia's human rights record and used crude language while describing the people financing the project. Yet he also presented the new league as leverage that could force changes from the PGA Tour. That word mattered, leverage. It suggested Live was not only a fresh competition, it was a pressure tool. Mickelson later argued that his conversation with Shipnuck had been private and used without proper context. Shipnuck maintained that the discussion was on the record. Regardless of that dispute, the published comments created immediate damage. Sponsors distanced themselves from Phil. He stepped away from golf. His public reputation collapsed almost overnight. Then he joined LIV. The move confirmed that Mickelson was willing to place his career behind the breakaway project despite the storm surrounding his earlier comments. He became more than another signing. Dustin Johnson, Brooks Koepka, Bryson DeChambeau, Cameron Smith, and other established players also joined, but Phil carried a different symbolic weight. He had won the PGA Championship at 50. He had spent decades building affection among American crowds. Fans followed him because he played aggressively, took impossible risks, and spoke with a confidence that sometimes crossed into arrogance. His thumbs-up gesture and relationship with galleries made him one of the most recognizable figures in the sport. When that man left, LIV gained legitimacy. The PGA Tour responded with suspensions. Litigation followed. Golfers attacked one another in interviews, press conferences, and online posts. Every tournament became another stage in a political battle. McIlroy stepped into the conflict as the PGA Tour's most visible defender. He attended meetings, answered difficult questions, supported structural changes, and carried responsibilities that went far beyond hitting golf shots. Rory did not simply criticize Levy from a safe distance. He spent his reputation defending the tour while executives worked behind closed doors. That role eventually cost him. In June 2023, the PGA Tour announced a framework agreement involving Saudi Arabia's public investment fund. McIlroy learned that the institution he had defended was willing to negotiate with the financial force behind LEV. The announcement made him look exposed. He had absorbed public attacks while decision-makers pursued an arrangement he had not controlled. Rory admitted that he felt like a sacrificial lamb. For a period, his tone softened. He expressed regret over judging some players too harshly and accepted that professional golf needed a solution. Critics used those comments against him. They claimed Rory had finally recognized that Mickelson had been correct from the beginning. The latest accusation destroys that interpretation. McIlroy can accept that the PGA Tour failed its players. He can regret the personal bitterness of the conflict. He can support negotiations. None of those positions require him to excuse Mickelson's decision to help create the split. Rory's argument contains two truths at once. The tour needed reform, and Phil's rebellion still caused enormous damage. That is a far more serious charge than calling Mickelson greedy. Greed can be dismissed as a motive shared across professional sports. Destruction carries a moral judgment. It means Phil placed his battle above the wider health of golf. Mickelson supporters reject that conclusion. They see a player who challenged a powerful organization after years of frustration. In their view, the tour enjoyed comfortable control until LIV introduced genuine competition. Suddenly, prize funds rose, schedules changed, top players received more attention, officials began discussing ownership and equity. Those benefits are real. The problem is their cost. Fans lost regular access to major names playing against one another. LIV events offered enormous contracts and a team format, but the league struggled to create the same history, weekly importance, and ranking clarity associated with established tours. The official world golf ranking dispute made qualification questions even more complicated. Players competed for huge money, while their positions within the traditional system became uncertain. Majors provided temporary reunions for 4 weeks each year. Golf looked whole again. The rest of the calendar remained divided. That division weakened ordinary tournaments. A PGA Tour leaderboard without several major champions felt incomplete. A LIV leaderboard without Scottie Scheffler, Rory McIlroy, and other tour stars carried the same problem. Each side could advertise elite talent. Neither side could honestly claim to gather all of it. McIlroy blamed the original defectors for accepting that result. Phil would argue the PGA Tour created the conditions that made defection attractive. Rory would answer that frustration did not justify tearing the structure apart. That disagreement has never been settled because both positions contain evidence. The Tour reacted too slowly. LIV reacted with overwhelming money. Players reacted according to their own interests. Fans inherited the mess. Mickelson also insisted that LIV provided opportunities and changed professional golf permanently. He spoke confidently about the league's future and predicted that more players would recognize its value. His public statements often portrayed LIV as an inevitable part of golf's new order, yet the revolution never delivered a simple victory. The PGA Tour survived. Major championships did not surrender their authority. LIV gained famous players but faced continuing questions about audience size, commercial value, world ranking access, and its long-term position. Negotiations between golf's power centers moved slowly while public promises produced more uncertainty. That record strengthens McIlroy's accusation. If LIV had quickly unified the sport under a stronger model, Phil could claim clear vindication. Instead, golf remained stuck between competing systems. The disruption arrived immediately. The lasting solution did not. Still, Rory's critics cannot erase the Tour's transformation. Players now compete for purses that would have looked extraordinary before LIV. The Tour created signature events and pursued outside investment. Its leaders began treating stars less like replaceable members and more like valuable business partners. Phil's pressure helped force that change. The fair conclusion is uncomfortable. Mickelson identified weaknesses that the PGA Tour had ignored, but his chosen remedy produced consequences far beyond those original complaints. Rory exposed that contradiction live on camera. Phil may have been right about the disease while being dangerously wrong about the treatment. Personal history made the attack even more compelling. McIlroy and Mickelson were never simple enemies. They shared years inside the same professional world. Rory understood Phil's importance and knew how much influence his decision carried. McIlroy even defended Mickelson against Shipnuck's treatment in a later confrontation with the author. That incident showed Rory could separate his feelings about Phil as a person from his judgment of Phil's role in LIV. This was not blind hatred. Rory's criticism was focused. He believed Mickelson helped detonate the existing order when negotiation remained possible. That focus also prevents the accusation from being mixed carelessly with separate misconduct claims involving Phil. Reports in 2026 raised allegations about Mickelson's conduct at private golf clubs. His representatives strongly rejected the broader account, attacked its sourcing, and described it as a click-driven narrative. Those claims remain separate from Rory's criticism of Phil's involvement in golf's split. McIlroy was addressing professional golf. He was not declaring Phil guilty of unrelated allegations. That distinction protects the real force of Rory's words. He did not need to borrow another controversy. The damage caused by golf's civil war was enough. Mickelson's legacy now sits inside that argument. His achievements cannot be removed. 6 major titles remain 6 major titles. His 45 PGA Tour victories still place him among the greatest winners of the modern era. His 2021 PGA Championship triumph remains one of golf's most remarkable performances. But legacy is not a scoreboard alone. It includes choices made when influence is greatest. Phil used his influence to support LIV at the exact moment the league needed credibility. Whether history treats that decision as courageous reform or reckless destruction depends on what professional golf becomes next. If the sport eventually reunifies under a fairer system, Mickelson's defenders will say his rebellion forced progress. They will present him as the difficult figure who accepted public hatred to break an outdated structure. If division continues, Rory's accusation will grow stronger. Phil will be remembered as the star who recognized genuine flaws, then pursued a solution that made the game harder to follow and almost impossible to govern. McIlroy also carries risk. He spent years defending a tour that did not always return his loyalty. His statements can sound morally certain, even when golf's business reality is complicated. Some players joined Live for financial security that the PGA Tour could not guarantee. Others believed the tour had ignored them. Rory's career wealth gave him freedom that less successful professionals never possessed. That counter-argument deserves respect. However, it does not fully answer Rory's criticism of Mickelson. Phil was not a struggling player facing the end of his career. Without financial protection, he had already earned enormous prize money, sponsorship income, and business opportunities. His decision carried greater consequences because his platform was larger than almost anyone else's. With power comes responsibility. Rory believes Phil failed that test. The accusation also reopened a question the sport repeatedly avoids. Who truly benefited from the split? Elite players received massive contracts and larger purses. Lawyers, advisors, broadcasters, and executives gained years of valuable work. Tour leaders secured new investment. Golf's biggest names acquired more negotiating power. Ordinary fans received separate schedules, political arguments, weaker weekly fields, and endless uncertainty. That imbalance explains why McIlroy's words connected so quickly. He said publicly what many frustrated viewers had felt since 2022. The people controlling professional golf fought over money and authority, while asking supporters to remain loyal to incomplete products. Phil became Rory's central example because he helped turn dissatisfaction into open rebellion. Mickelson has every right to defend his decision. He can point toward increased purses, player equity, and the collapse of the PGA Tour's old comfort zone. He can argue that polite conversations had failed and only a credible threat could produce serious reform. But Rory's challenge remains unanswered. Did reform require blowing everything apart? No contract can answer that. No press release can erase the lost years. The judgment will come from whether golf's leaders finally create a system that places the strongest players together regularly without forcing fans to choose a political side. Until then, both men will remain tied to the fracture. Phil Mickelson will stand as the revolutionary who forced change and accepted a staggering reward for doing it. Rory McIlroy will stand as the loyalist who defended tradition, demanded accountability, and later discovered that loyalty had limits inside a billion-dollar business. Their conflict is bigger than personality. It is a battle over how change should happen. Mickelson believed disruption created leverage. McIlroy believed dialogue could have produced reform without destroying unity. Phil acted first and the entire sport changed. Rory has now delivered his judgment before the cameras. The result is brutal for Mickelson because Rory did not expose a hidden scorecard violation. He exposed the unresolved contradiction at the heart of Phil's campaign. Mickelson claimed to be improving professional golf, yet the game became more divided, more expensive, and more difficult for fans to understand. He forced progress. He also helped create the damage. At 56, Phil Mickelson's reputation is no longer protected by trophies, smiles, or memories of fearless shots. Every chapter of his legacy now leads back to the decision that split golf. Rory McIlroy has placed responsibility directly on him, and no easy defense can remove it. The final question is not whether Phil changed golf. He unquestionably did. The question is whether the change was worth the destruction required to achieve it. Drop Phil in the comments if you believe Mickelson forced necessary reform, or drop Rory if you believe he damaged golf for personal leverage. If honest golf coverage matters to you, subscribe. We cover the conflicts, the evidence, and the stories shaping the game.